Heading into week 13 of the fantasy football season, here's a few tight ends I would look to get on the waiver wire this week. The first guy, Cole Kmet of the Chicago Bears. So Cole Kmet here, he's been up and down this season, very inconsistent, no doubt about it, but he looked good versus the Detroit Lions in week 12, especially with Andy Dalton at the helm. 8 catches, 65 yards on 11 targets in that ball game. So I know it was a good matchup at Detroit. I know this week it's a tougher one in week 13 versus the Arizona Cardinals. But Cole Kmet, like I mentioned, he's been inconsistent the last few games. Week 9 at the Steelers, 6 catches, 87 yards. Week 11 versus Baltimore, 1 catch, 12 yards. And week 12 at Detroit, 8 catches, 65 yards. So right here, we'll see what he can do in week 13. I know tight end's a crapshoot and a very weak position in fantasy football this season once again. But right now, Cole Kmet's available in a lot of fantasy leagues at 75%. And he's definitely a guy to look into and get on the waiver wire this week. The next tight end I look to get this week is Foster Monroe of the Las Vegas Raiders. So we saw Darren Waller go out with a leg injury and a back injury in that week 12 ball game versus the Dallas Cowboys on Thanksgiving Day. And Monroe, I know he didn't do much in that one. 1 catch for 3 yards, but the one start he did have this season here for Darren Waller. Week 7 versus Philly, 6 catches, 60 yards, and a touchdown. Eric Carr praised him where he thinks he's going to be a breakout type of player. Obviously, he's not going to have huge games with Darren Waller in the lineup, but if Waller's going to miss any extended amount of time here, Monroe's definitely a pickup, and he's got a good matchup in Week 13 versus the Washington football team that gives up the 17th most fantasy points to tight ends on the season, and he's widely available in a whopping 99% of fantasy leagues. So right here, if Waller's going to miss time, Monroe's going to be the best tight end pickup, in my opinion, this week off the waiver wire. The next tight end I look to get on the wire this week's Jack Doyle of the Indianapolis Colts. So it's a name we really haven't heard over the last few seasons here is Jack Doyle, but he came off a breakout performance versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in week 12. 6 catches, 81 yards, and a touchdown in that one. So Doyle here, I know he's been doing okay, not the greatest in numbers the last few weeks. Week 10 versus Jacksonville, 3 catches, 31 yards. Week 11 at the Bills, 3 catches, 30 yards. And then the breakout game versus Tampa Bay. And in week 13, he's got a great matchup at the Houston Texans that give up the 5th most fantasy points to tight ends on the season. And right here, I know the tight ends over there in Indianapolis are inconsistent, obviously, like Jack Doyle, who's been the whole season, and Mo Alley-Cox. But right here with a good matchup and a breakout game, he's definitely a guy to consider on the wire this week. And he's available in 99% of fantasy leagues. The next tight end's Brevin Jordan of the Houston Texans. So this Houston Texan team, they're just a dumpster fire this season. 2-9 on the season, not much going. But Brevin Jordan had a decent ball game versus the New York Jets in week 12. 3 catches, 23 yards, and he found the end zone in that one. So we've seen flashes from him. Week 8 versus the Rams, 3 catches, 41 yards, and a touch. Week 9 in Miami, 2 catches, 9 yards. Week 11 at Tennessee, a catch for 7 yards. But right here, week 13, he's got a good matchup versus the Indianapolis Colts that give up the 6th most fantasy points to tight ends. And obviously, this team's going to be trailing early and often are the Texans here versus the Colts. So they're going to have to throw a lot. And maybe Brevin Jordan can find the end zone with 30 or 40 yards in Week 13's ball game. And right now, he's available in 100% of fantasy leagues. And the 5th and final tight end I look to get on the wire this week's Nick Vannett of the New Orleans Saints. So we saw Trautman's going to be out for a while with his injury 4 to 6 weeks. And Nick Vannett was a decent target in that ball game. 1 catch, 11 yards, but he did find the end zone for this New Orleans Saints team here. I know Juwan Johnson's over there as well, but Nick Vannett finding the end zone to me is a guy who could possibly contribute over here for the New Orleans Saints. And only in the deepest of leagues, he's a guy to consider on the waiver wire. This week here, not many great tight end options on the waiver wire, but he's a guy to consider. He came off a touchdown. He's the backup, obviously, with Trautman out now for a multiple week injury. And he's a guy to consider. So that's a few tight ends I've looked at on the waiver wire here for Week 13 of the fantasy football season.